Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host, Karen. We just interviewed a wonderful guest that I can't wait to share with you. But first, let's ask about you, Miss Karen. Anything new?
Same old Tess. Although I noticed that before we started to record, we were both like paused for a second, like just wait a second to take a big swig of water. And I was wondering, what is it about these podcasts that make us so thirsty?
I don't know. I think it's like when the electricity is off or you don't have hot water, you immediately are like, oh, I really need that. And so maybe we're just like, oh, we won't be able to drink while we're recording. So we better go ahead and get some water.
I better get hydrated.
Yeah.
So, speaking of our guest, Sally Hepworth, she's the very first guest we ever had who used the word gnarly. Did you not love that?
I love the word gnarly. And I was spelling it in my head when she said it. It's like, I always have to think about how to spell it.
Well, and she was using it to describe the first draft of a novel, how it's this big gnarly mess. And I was like, oh, that's so perfect. That's exactly what it is.
And she had a metaphor, which I won't give away, that I have never heard before in relation to how she puts a novel together. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I thought that is so
awesome.
great.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And as she was talking, I was like, that is exactly what it's like to write a novel.
Yes.
So yes, she is one wise woman. And she looks like a model, although she did say she was dressed up to go to an event. But even so,
she looked amazing. She's like a movie star. And speaking of movies, she has a great movie deal that's with Amy Poehler, and that's exciting. So she talks about that too. It was a good interview. We were jazzed afterward.
Oh, absolutely. I hope everyone enjoys it as much as we did, because it was great.
All right, everybody, enjoy the show. Today, we are thrilled to have Sally Hepworth with us. She is the New York Times bestselling author of 7 novels, most recently, The Younger Wife. Drawing on the good, the bad, and the downright odd of human behavior, Sally writes incisively about family, relationships, and identity. Her domestic thriller novels are laced with quirky humor, sass, and a darkly charming tone. Absolutely true. She has novels available worldwide in English and has been translated into 20 languages. And she lives in Melbourne, Australia, with her husband and 3 children. Welcome from the future. We are so happy to meet you and have you on the podcast.
Although actually she's in the future. We're in the past.
Right. Okay, said it wrong. Yeah.
I won't tell you what's going to happen, so it'll be a surprise. Thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm delighted.
So tell us a little bit about your path to publication. Did you always want to be a novelist?
Yeah, that's a hard one, isn't it? Because hindsight is 2020. And now my mum always tells everyone, I always knew Sally was going to be an author. And I think to myself, well, why didn't you tell me, Mum, when I was going through all that angst of trying to figure out what I was going to do? Did I know? I mean, I very famously said when I was 7 years old that I wanted to write a book, and I did. I went, immediately after saying that and wrote a book of short stories, which I then made my aunt, who published school textbooks at the time, publish and, do a copyright symbol, and it has my name and copyright 1987, on the back of it. So to some extent, I suppose it might have been written in the stars, but there was that big period between, when being 7 years old and when I was 34, I guess, when I published my first novel, where it wasn't quite as clear to me that was what I wanted to do. And I, did that kind of roundabout. I went to university, did an arts degree. I worked in event management. I worked in human resources. But every job that I had and everything that I did became about the writing, whether it was the policies and procedures when I was in HR or the programs for the events that I ran. That was my love area, and that was where I ended up. And so when I did start thinking, I'd love to write a novel, which really I think came on the heels of reading some amazing books, and I had the audacity to think maybe I could do this, that I thought, you know what, I would like to try it. I think I might be okay at writing. And then I chose the very strange time of maternity leave when, like all stupid first-time mothers, I thought I was going to have all this time to just write a novel. And, as it happened, I did give birth to who I now call my robot baby, because my son, who's now 12, was just like a machine of having these gorgeous long naps. And my two daughters that came afterwards did not get that memo, and they were not robot babies. But I've always been meaning to dedicate a book to my robot baby, who allowed me to get that first book written, which really kind of set the love, even though that book wasn't the great work of art that I thought it was at the time. It made me realize that this is what I love. And I've been writing books ever since then.
If someone isn't familiar with your books, is there one in particular you'd suggest they start with?
Well, I always like to tell them to start with the most recent book, which is The Younger Wife, or depending on when this podcast comes out, The Good Sister is my book that was published in 2021. And in 2022, in April, The Younger Wife is coming out. And the reason I say that is that, I always feel like the freshest part of me is in the most recent book. And often you evolve and as a person and as an author, and your books evolve with you. But I could go through each one, The Mother-in-Law, The Family Next Door, The Secrets of Midwives, and tell you why they're all special to me. But my advice is usually to start with the most recent and perhaps work backwards from there.
Your novel, The Mother-in-Law, is going to be adapted for film with Amy Poehler producing, for those of us who want to live vicariously through you. Can you share how that came about?
Yes, well, I always have to say up front that it had very little to do with me, or it probably wouldn't have happened. So just to put some context around that, I have an amazing literary agent who really allows me to just write the books, which is what I'm, good at, I hope, and what I love to do. And he is having all the meetings behind the scenes with people like Amy Poehler and their, her people, and, people who might be interested in the books, turning them into a series. And so it was kind of late in the piece when I found out that she was interested. And the first step was that we had a phone call, and that was funny because I'm here in Australia. And so the phone call was set up for 6 a.m. or it may have even been 5 a.m. It was very early. And I was really nervous that my kids were going to come in when I was on the phone to Amy Poehler. And so I took the call in my car, which was parked in my garage. And I was in my pajamas because it was winter, with my dressing gown on, in the car, in the garage, in the dark. And my agent had said to me, Sally, just be cool, because I'm not cool, in case you hadn't kind of figured that out. I'm very enthusiastic. And he said, just be cool, just let her woo us. So in my head, I'm cutting all the lines, that, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. That's on the cutting room floor. So I waited, and it was a conference call. And there was Rob and I, and then you hear this little ping, as the person drops into the call. And I heard the ping, and she said, hey, it's Amy. And I said, hi, Amy, it's Sally. I'm such a big fan of yours. And then I could feel through the kind of phone waves over in LA, my agent just face palming and thinking we've just lost all of the upper hand right there. But Amy, being the gorgeous, friendly, hilarious person that she is, just said, oh, Sally, I'm such a big fan of yours. And then we were off. So that was gorgeous. And I then was lucky enough to meet her for breakfast when I was in LA a couple of months later. And that was equally glorious and embarrassing and wonderful, and hearing her kind of express, really, I mean, she's so funny and great, but what was so great about her is that she's so passionate about women. First of all, her production company employs, I think, exclusively women, not just, but for their camera crews and their writers. It's just a great organization for women. And she really understood what I was trying to do with the mother-in-law, and she fed it back to me, which really made me feel confident that she understood. So yeah, it was a wonderful meeting. And then at the end, as we walked away from that as peers, as it were, I had to then ask her for a selfie, because imagine I went away from, that meeting without a selfie. I'm thinking she may not actually option it, and this might be the only moment I get. And so, of course, then I lost all, any kind of indication that we might be peers, and we were smiling like this. So again, I lost the upper hand, but I'm not good at holding on to the upper hand. And she did go ahead and option it. So it was.
Oh, that's so awesome.
I pulled it off.
You did. And I have to say, I liked your American accent when you did that little quote from Mean Girl.
Thanks.
That was good.
Oh, yes. I think I've got my California accent okay. I can't do some of the East Coast. I've got to work on that.
When you're not writing best-selling novels, you can work on that. So what does a writing day look like for you? And then question I really want to know is, do you outline your books?
Okay, so what does an average day look like? I'm going to give you that annoying answer of no 2 days is alike. But isn't that true for every career? I mean, you can ask a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher. It's very rare, I think, for anyone in a job to do the same thing every day. And, today, for example, I'm starting the day with a podcast. Well, I start the day with 3 children who all need things from me, and finding a hat and packing a lunchbox and remembering homework that's overdue and all of those things. And then, I'm doing a podcast today. After I finish, I've got to send off a few publicity items that are due. Then I'm jumping in a car and driving for 4 hours to do a library event in country Victoria and staying there for a couple of nights. That's not a usual day for me, but in a way it is, because, it just constantly, the career of being an author, I think is one of the things that I try and be really clear about when I talk about my writing, is that it's about the writing of the books. That's what allows the business to run. But then that's the product. There's still all the other pieces of running a business, which include, the admin, the invoicing and the tax, the publicity, which is things like this, getting my computer virus protected, because that was an issue yesterday, branding and booking for my US tour, trying to get that all organized. There are so many pieces of it, and that's why every day is different. But certainly, if I'm in the writing zone and I'm trying to get a book, out of me, then that is usually a pretty head down process that starts early in the morning. I'll write 2,000 words a day. Hopefully that's usually the goal. And I don't think about it too much. I write it really fast. I get it out of my head in a big, gnarly, ugly kind of version. And then I'm a polisher. There's this great analogy that is not mine. I stole it and I can't remember from who, so I can't even attribute it. But that it's like getting a book out of you is like getting a dinosaur or dinosaur remains out of a ground. You get all the bones out with some sort of device, and they're all covered in mud and they're not in the right order. But you know that there's a dinosaur there. And then you slowly get out your tools to polish them, to arrange them, and you polish until you finally get that thing that you see in a museum. And that is my process. Do I plan? It sounds like no, if you listen to that analogy, and yet I do plan to a certain extent. And so I'm always so confused when I get to that point where I've got this big ugly draft, because I think I planned. This was meant to avoid all of this, but it doesn't. It's just, for me, I plan, it's still ugly and gnarly and not quite right. And then it's just many, many drafts of getting it from this kind of mud-caked monster into something that hopefully shines.
How long does it usually take you from start to finish?
It takes about 3 months to get out the dirt-caked beast, just that writing every day, 2,000 words. That's about 3 months. And then it takes another 3 months for me to polish it to the point that I'm ready to show someone. And that's all just with me. So, I'll know straight away, this is not a book yet. This is, and I will I'll refine that 3, 4, 5 times on my own. After 6 months, it's then ready to be shared, usually with my publisher, or I have one in Australia and one in the US, and it's a collaborative approach. Then that comes back to me and I work on it again and might go back to them. So it's a book a year is what I do, and that is a really workable timeline for me. But as I said, there's so many other parts to that year. So I think probably 6 months intensive work on the book, and then probably another 3 months of work that's interspersed with all of the other stuff that I do.
So then is your editor the first one who sees the book?
Yes. In the past, I have shared it with writer friends, trusted readers. And sometimes I still will. Certainly if there is a piece of the book, my most recent book, I've written one actually since The Younger Wife, involves a character with bipolar, which was something that I did a lot of research on. And I did have someone with bipolar read it because I really wanted to make sure that I got that piece right. But in general, I do go pretty close to straight to my editor these days because I realised that too many eyes on it, too many cooks can sometimes not be a great thing. And I really trust my editor. She gets what I'm trying to do. And I find just going straight to her is usually the best way to get the best out of the book.
Tell us a little bit more about how it works with an editor in the States and in Australia. I've heard of this from others, and I'm always curious how you manage that as a writer.
It is common, and I know a number of authors who have got even more. Often there's a UK publisher in there and, various other things. For me, it is, 3. There is my agent who is really involved editorially. There is my editor in the States, and then my editor here in Australia. And so how it works is that when I've got the book ready to show people, I send it to all of them. They'll read it simultaneously and they will copy each other on their notes. And usually the notes are really, they complement each other's. One of them will have brought something up and then someone else might have a suggestion, or someone might not have brought something up, but they say, hey, actually, I noticed that too. I agree. That's really helpful. Every now and then they disagree, and then it's up to me to decide. But in truth, it's always up to me. I'm very lucky with my editors in that they very rarely say, I don't like this, do that, or change this, or that's wrong. They say things like, I didn't quite believe that Susan would push Larry off the cliff. That's not a spoiler. I just made that up. Or, why did Jane fall in love with Steve? He seemed like a pig. And so it's forcing me to go deeper. And usually when they say that, I think, I know that was stupid. Of course she wouldn't fall in love with Steve. He was a pig. And so I then have to dig deep because I know the story the best and I'm likely to have the solution that will work. So it's more, it just keeps me honest a little bit. I might have tried to sneak something in that wasn't my best work. And between the 3 of them, they always catch those things, which is kind of annoying, but kind of good.
Do you dread the emails a little bit?
Oh, yes. This is why authors have historically been drunks, because I understand that more and more with every year that I am in this game. But, it's awful. One funny thing that a lot of authors joke about is that they think we don't understand what am I allowed to swear? Can I say that?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Believe me, yes.
The shit sandwich, where they come in and they say, I was going to do an American accent, but it's written, so there's no accent. I loved your book. It was so fantastic. I really loved this. And then, 2 lines, and then straight into the middle. These are all the things that don't work. And then once again, I think it's going to be amazing. Our eye just skips to the bit where we see what isn't working. But that's an editor's job. We are so happy that they do that because it saves us the humiliation of publishing a book that is not very good. So yes, we dread it, but also we're very grateful. And in the end, I almost always agree. Once I've had a moment to scream into my pillow and down a bottle of vodka, then I think, yeah, I understand why you have your job. You're quite good at it, you editors.
Yeah. I'm interested because I'm in such awe of thriller writers. How do you come up with a list that you jot down and think, oh, that could be a story later? So that question, and then also just how do you think of these complex thriller plots?
It's still so funny to me that I'm a thriller writer because, and most authors I know don't think about genre. They just think, oh, I want to write this book, at least in the outset, I suppose some do. But for me, I guess my first few books were really women's fiction. And then The Mother-in-Law was really the first one that kind of fell into that thriller category. And that came to me as just, wouldn't it be interesting if a mother-in-law was found dead and we didn't know, who did it. And so it wasn't, oh, I'm going to write a thriller. It was just, here's a plot that really interests me and I'm going to write it. And since then, that has continued to be the way. While my books have definitely had a slant towards that thriller thing, it's still always started with an idea. And crimey ideas are just wonderful for a writer because of the inherent conflict. It also marries really well to the other thing which I'm passionate about writing about, which is family dysfunctionality, because, who hasn't wanted to murder a family member once or twice? In fact, I was just telling on another podcast the time that I threw a knife at my dad when I was very, very pregnant and he ate my ice cream cone. And I swear in that moment, I wanted to hit him with the knife. And we chuckle about it as a family, like it's this like raucous thing. But I'm like, I was inches away from being in jail. And that is what is so interesting about families. And we are a close family. We love each other. But I was pregnant and it was the last bit of ice cream. Things can really go south quickly in families. And so that's where it comes from me. But I've forgotten what was the second part of the question.
Do you jot down ideas? Do you have a running list of ideas?
No, because ideas are everywhere. Everywhere you look, there are things, a story someone will tell you, something you see on the news. And while a lot of them could turn out to be a book, I feel like, at the risk of sounding a bit airy-fairy, because I'm quite pragmatic actually with these things, but sometimes these ideas choose you. It's the ones that you don't need to write down because it stays with you in your soul. The mother-in-law did, the younger wife did, the latest one did. A little moment that could have just come into your mind and passed through and disappeared, but it didn't. And that's because that was the book that you were meant to write. That does sound airy-fairy, and I don't mean it to be, but I think it's that topic sticks because you have something to say about it. And so writing it down is a little bit pointless for me because I know if it's a good one, it'll stick, and if it doesn't stick, it's not my story to tell.
What about endings? I know readers of domestic suspense and thrillers, they love when there's a little twist and they didn't quite anticipate it. Is that something that you find easy to do, or do you think of multiple options? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, again, it's different every single time. There was a twist at the end of The Good Sister that just I was just writing it and then, oh, that just happened. And that's kind of to do with the way that I write, that I like to leave every last chapter on a bit of a, something that propels you forward. So I found myself doing that in the very last chapter, and it left me with a twist that I really thought, oh, cool, I'm going to leave that. I was going to say it's rare that I plan it. That's not true. I do plan twists, but it's rare that the twist that I planned works out the way that I thought that it would, because you can have a plan, but a plan is not a book, and so many things that look right on a plan, once you thrash it out and you've created these characters and these plot lines, you realize, well, that was a bit weak, or that character wouldn't do that, or in light of all of the other things that I've created, this doesn't work anymore. So I use the plan really as more of a, like a guide, and almost always the best things come to you once you've really understood the meat of the book and you've got to know the characters, and then you can really look at the guide and think, does that still work? And it might not, or it might be a springboard for something better.
I actually was lucky enough to read The Younger Wife, which is coming out very soon. And I loved the ending. It was the kind of ending where, and Tess, you agreed with me when we talked about this, that when you read it, you immediately want to talk to someone else who read it to discuss it. And so I think readers are going to adore this book. You didn't handle it any way I would have anticipated. So
I hope that's a good, and I can't talk obviously too much about it, but I'm looking forward to discussing the ending, because I did put, believe it or not, quite a lot of thought into that ending, and it did go back and forth a little bit, but there was an important reason why I ended it the way that it did. Yeah, I guess I'll have to, once people have read it, I can come out and talk about that a bit more.
So what is your methodology for choosing titles? And does your editor or your publisher generally keep the ones that you select?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because we're in the middle of what I call a title war, which makes it sound much more dramatic than it is, because it's actually everyone's very polite and getting along very well, but that's not that interesting. I prefer title war, like we're all enemies. And that was something that comes from having multiple editors in different countries. We had decided on a title for the next book, not The Younger Wife, that the American publisher was happy with, but the Australian publisher was not, and they wanted to come up with something different. And then I said, no, not having two titles. No, it's hard enough. I've got, the same book comes out 6 months apart in two different countries. If you put another title on it, the amount of emails that I'm going to get about that is unacceptable. That's what I said. You can tell that I'm getting a bit perimenopausal, because I used to be really easygoing, and now I've started saying things like that. So I think where we've landed on that is that we've got a title which we now agree on and we all really like. But no, it wasn't a title that I came up with. What will normally happen is that I will have a working title on a manuscript that's not very good. And I know that it's going to change, or I hope that it's going to change, because I'm not that good at titles. And then we go through and we just focus on the manuscript. And then once the manuscript gets to a point where we're getting pretty close, everyone's mind turns to titles, and there's a bit of back and forth. In the past, because my books have really focused on one familial relationship, whether it's the mother-in-law, the good sister, the younger wife, the next book is going to be about marriage, it has been sort of easy to title them. But then there's a whole lot of other forces, like, has the title already existed, and does it sound like it's a thriller, which is how I'm being positioned. There's a whole lot of things that come into it that don't even cross my mind. So I do try to, listen to the experts, as it were, in the marketing department and let them help. But yeah, it's collaborative.
Do you ever have doubts about a book, either while you're writing it or after it's been published?
Yes, both. All I have is doubts. I have doubts often before I've even started. Oh, this isn't going to be any good. And then the whole, no, it's not any good. Oh, no. Oh, now it's gone out for people to read. I think doubt's a part of it. I'm yet to meet an author, or at least a female author, that does not have any doubts about their work, writers or otherwise. And while it's not all that comfortable to have doubts, I do think that having some doubt is part of what forces us to give our best and do our best work, because we care, and that's why we keep working on it. So it's just about getting the balance right, because sometimes doubt can cripple you and stop you from doing anything. That's the wrong amount of doubt. But if you can have that self-belief with doubt together and kind of balance it, which is a daily, sometimes hourly thing to get right, then I think that's kind of where you have to be as an author.
A lot of our listeners are writers or aspiring writers. Do you have a writing book you'd recommend?
Yes, well, I always recommend a book called The Plot Whisperer by Martha Alderson. And I haven't actually read it for years, because I read it 10 years ago when I was starting out. And someone read it recently and said to me, "It's quite airy-fairy woo-woo." And I said, "Is it?" And they said, "Yes." And I thought, "Oh, I don't remember that bit." What I remember is that it gave really good concrete kind of structural stuff about how to set up a novel. And I really loved that. Some people who've read it at my recommendation have loved the woo-woo stuff. So there could be something for everyone, but certainly she does a great job of pointing out the 5 energetic markers of a novel. And I still think about the inciting incident, the end of the beginning, the midpoint reversal, the crisis, and the climax. And even if I do nothing else for any book that I write, I always have those 5. And I think they are at the heart of every novel.
What other advice do you have for aspiring authors?
I find advice hard, because being an author is so many things. It's a bit like if someone was a doctor and they said, "What's your advice for being a doctor?" or "What's your advice for being a mechanic?" Well, there are a lot of things that need to happen. I mean, hard work is a given. Immersing yourself in the industry and understanding how it works is a given. Luck. There are so many pieces of it, but I think that just continuing to do it, I guess, harking back to that self-doubt thing, is that one thing that I do see a lot of is people who are trapped on the first book, or the first chapter of the first book, or the first paragraph, in this plight to get it right and make it perfect. And I think first drafts and first books are meant to be imperfect. And once you've written an imperfect one, you can then edit it, you can then write another one. And so don't get locked into something that's not working. Kind of free yourself up and keep doing it. I think if I had to pick one piece of advice, maybe that's it.
What do you wish people knew about the life of an author? Have you encountered any misconceptions?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like I said to you earlier, that it's running a business, which sounds terribly unromantic. I always get kind of clapped down when I'm in a panel with other authors who are talking about the beauty of the words and the characters, travel and they can hear them speak, and I'm there saying, well, it's a business, which sounds, and it's a creative business, like many creative businesses, like graphic designers, like architects, like painters. Painters also have to do their books and have to advertise and have to, market themselves. So I think it's not that I wish people would understand it. It just makes me chuckle when people say things like, "Oh, well, when you've locked yourself away in your office for hours on end." And I think, I have 3 children, and I'm not an old man in a cabin in the woods, with a bottle of whiskey and my typewriter, in the muse. Like, I wish I was. And I think that's what people envisage when you say that you're an author. And it's not that the creative piece isn't the biggest part of it, because it is, but it's probably only 50% of what I do. And it's my favorite 50%. But it is for all working authors who are bringing out multiple books, and career authors, I suppose, it's both. And for some reason, that's still a surprise to people. So I suppose that's the flag that I'm flying.
Is there a book that you've wanted to write but haven't yet for some reason?
Well, I have always been interested in cults. Whenever I hear about something to do with a cult, I think, oh, I want to read that. And I know that whenever I want to read a book or read about a topic, that's usually a book that I should write about. But I equally haven't kind of had an idea and strayed away from it. It's that is an idea that's floating that hasn't quite, as I spoke about earlier, it hasn't quite stuck because I haven't got the right idea. And it would have to be my own twist on it because I'm not going to go, I have my own style of writing that's a bit of light and shade. I like to do the black humor and relationships. And so I'm never going to write that straight up religious cult kind of book. So I feel like that could be a book down the track when I unpick what that book would look like for me. Yeah, I would say that's the one that continues to float around. And until I wrote my most recent book, I would have said marriage. I'm desperate to explore marriage because what a wonderful relationship that's just ripe for exploration, especially when I was writing it here in Australia. We had been in lockdown for 2 years with our husbands, and my chat with my girlfriends was just full of the most glorious minutiae of the ways that our husbands were pissing us off, and and my favorite was we were going into back and forth and just delighting in it. One of my friends is saying, Stu hasn't put his shoes away for 3 months. And, someone else, well, Sam has left his hair in the sink. And, it was back and forth. And then our friend Emily just wrote, Andy is sitting next to me on the couch and he just breathed and I almost put a pillow over his face and smothered him. And I just thought, this is going to be a glorious thing to explore. And the idea landed and I wrote it. So I think that, as I said, the next one, they tend to keep coming in the order that I'm meant to write them.
When you're writing a book, do you have an ideal reader in mind, someone at the other end who's reading?
No, I don't really. I've heard people say that that's a good idea. That's a good thing to do. I guess in a way I'm picturing someone like myself. Would I like to read this? Would this hold my interest? Am I still interested? As an author, if you're bored of your own story, you think this isn't good. But yeah, I suppose I'm really writing it for myself and for people, I guess, that see the world like I do. But that said, I know a lot of people who are very different to me, who see the world quite differently from me, who have enjoyed it. So I don't think that precludes it from anyone else enjoying it. But yeah, I'm speaking out from my own mind, probably to people like me as I write.
Have you ever started a manuscript and made the deliberate decision not to finish it?
I don't think I have. I know lots of friends that have stopped something halfway through. With my books, ever since The Secrets of Midwives, all of my books have been contracted to a publisher, to my publisher. And so once I've kind of had it approved, I'm writing the book that they've asked for. So I think I could abandon it if I didn't think it was working and say, hey, I'm going to write something else. I haven't done that. I have written a book that was rejected once it was finished, and quite rightly, because it wasn't right. But yeah, that was not my decision. And in the end, it was the right decision. But yeah, I think that probably making the decision yourself is a tough one for sure, saying, hey, I'm going to throw out these few months of work, but it'll probably happen. I plan to write books for the rest of my life. So maybe the next one.
Hopefully we haven't cursed you.
I know.
By simply asking the question.
Thanks, guys.
So when you're in the middle of your 6 months of intensive writing, how consumed are you with the story?
All consumed. It's all I think about. It's all I talk about. It's all I dream about. My husband has to also be in this state of readiness to talk about it, which he finds funny. We'll be going for a walk, which we do on the weekends, to get a coffee, and we'll go from talking about the weather or where we've got to drop the kids, and then I'll say, maybe Frank was the one who killed her. And he just has to switch and at least pretend that he's interested for a few minutes. and switch back. And I have one other friend who's usually across the book enough that I can have those conversations with. But you have to live and breathe it, I think, to make sense of it and to finish it.
Speaking of your husband, you might have a quick answer to this one. Who's been your biggest supporter as you built your craft and career?
Yeah, it's been my husband. And, and really I mean that in the sense that a lot of husbands that I have had in my world have been supportive of their wives' careers, of course, because they think, well, yes, I want her to be successful. I want her to make money. And, I don't wish her ill. I want her to have the things that she wants to have. But it's something else to support someone by actually changing your behavior, stepping up as a equal parent and going without things so I can have my career. And, now my husband is the primary parent, so he now looks after the kids and I am the one that works. But it's been a slow process from when I started writing books. He immediately stepped up as the parent, the secondary parent then, but it's made a slow increase, and housework and all of those things. So he really supported me verbally, but also backed it up with actions, which was the reason that I have been able to find success.
Now, to get back to The Younger Wife, your upcoming book, it intertwines the points of view of three main characters, all of whom have secrets of their own. How tricky was it to interconnect all the puzzle pieces to make it work?
It was tricky, but that's something that I find quite fun. I quite enjoy that. And there's always this glorious moment where it's a real headache and you're trying to work out how things are going to work, and then it clicks into place and it's like, hallelujah, oh my gosh, this is like it was meant to be this way. And not that someone asked me recently, do I write each story separately and then try and connect them? I don't. I write it as one story, and yet through the unpicking and putting back together of my process, it always ends up as a bit of a puzzle. Yeah, particularly there's a lot of neuroses in The Younger Wife, which is a bit of a nod to me and some of my friends, where we're all some of the most neurotic women that you could possibly meet with our own stories. And I think it kind of felt right that it was a bit of a neurotic process putting the book together. So
what are you working on now, if you don't mind sharing a little?
Well, I actually just finished a short story that I have written for Amazon. Amazon has a program called Amazon Original Stories, and they're bringing out a summer series of short stories. And they've given, I think there's 5 authors the same writing prompt about a summer holiday, and we've had to write these short stories, which was super fun. I remember my agent asked if I would do it, and I said, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. And then I immediately Googled how to write a short story. How hard can it be? I can do this. And I have, and I've really enjoyed that. And I'm doing the final copy edits on the next book, which is the one about marriage. And then I'm about to dive into the new book, the one after that. So no rest for the wicked.
Right.
Well, now we're to the part of the podcast where we ask our fun extra questions that have nothing to do with writing. Are you ready?
Ready.
Number 1, what is the one food that will never get past your lips?
Tuna.
Any tuna or just the kind in the can?
Definitely the can, but I have had a tuna steak in a very nice restaurant that was delicious, but I had big anxiety as I ate it.
Okay. Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Naomi Watts.
I totally see it.
Good one, yeah.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Invisibility. So I could eavesdrop on people. How good would that be?
That would be fun.
I know.
Yes. What's your biggest guilty pleasure?
I don't like calling pleasures guilty because I think that but look, I really like this Australian brand of ramen noodles called Maggi noodles in Australia, and I still eat them all the time. And I probably wouldn't eat them if anyone else was here to see me because it feels so student, but they're so damn tasty. So maybe that would be what it is.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
I worked at a market research company when I was at university who rang people up to do phone surveys. And I remember on my first day, calling up and you've got your headphone and you've got your script and someone answered and it was dinner time. Like, of course they didn't want to talk to me, but I did my spiel, you know, I was getting paid, and whoever it was on the phone paused after I finished and then said, "You people don't deserve to live." And I thought,
my gosh.
oh my God. And so, look, it was a well-paid job and it got me through university, but, you know, I got some of my best/worst insults of my life at that job. So probably that one. My self-esteem took a beating.
Yeah.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Languages. I'd love to be able to, you know, be a linguist that could speak multiple languages. I just think that would be amazing and a really useful skill. Like, I could probably help the police, you know, crack codes for, I don't know. I'd probably do nothing useful with it, but it'd be cool. A cool party trick.
What's your favorite smell?
My mum's perfume, and I don't wear it, but it just fills me with that, you know, like mum's here feeling.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Oh gosh, I'm not really a big risk taker. I went to live in London when I was 20 by myself, and that was kind of scary. And yeah, I mean, I've traveled the world a lot of the time alone, and there have been some scary moments for sure. I would say that they're probably up there.
What is one thing you're really bad at?
Remembering things. I always just have lists and you know, reminders and stuff everywhere, and then I can't remember where the reminders are. Remembering things is definitely something I'm bad at.
And our final question, if you could live your life over again, would you want to?
Yes, of course. I'd make much better decisions the next time around. Yes, of course.
This has been delightful, Sally. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm so chuffed. It's been great fun.
Yes, best of luck with the new book. I'm excited to read it. I'm not on in the in group that got to read it already, like Karen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hope that someone will send you a copy now.
Not to worry. I'll get my hands on it. Anyway, thanks again and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comment section. This has been Behind the Book.